depends on what the deal is. I have a pretty good budget.
Okay. I assume that it's working now, so feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Yes.
Can I ask you a question before we begin?
Well, we've begun. Yeah, but go ahead. Sure.
Is there a size limit for the teams on Game Jam?
Is there a size limit for teams? No. Teams self-form, so if you wanted to have a team of 300, you could. You would just have to convince 299 other people to be on your team.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no restrictions in Game Jam, and a lot of people will show up. If your game looks like it's going to fail or something like that, they just play the rest of the time. But there's a lot of benefits that if you do participate, because going through that, like one of the things that they said in this video that we just watched was, what's the best way to learn game development or game design?
Make games.
Is to do it. And so this is just another thing. And the Bazaar, remember how I challenged everybody to do Bazaar stuff? I think I had one person that really did Bazaar. Where are you? Right here. Pants off. Thumbs up for Pants Off. I mean, it's a different kind of game, right? So it's when you get out there in the real world, they're going to tell you exactly what to do. You don't really have control over what it is that you're making. And so in this case, Pants Off was the weirdest thing that I've seen. So congratulations. So I'm looking for unique elements because this is your chance. Even if it fails, I'd rather you have done something weird that fails than to do something safe because you're either in trying to impress other people or it's just a favorite genre of yours. Notice in that game design that they said playing a lot of the same game. Is anybody guilty of that? I'm guilty of that, right? I have a whole bunch of games in my Steam account that I've never played, and it's because I'm just as guilty as you are. I play Borderlands 2 over and over again, and I know that really well. But it's a good idea to go out there and play a wide variety of games. How many people are playing more than, let's say, 15 games this month? Anybody? Okay, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. But you know what I'm saying. It's like when I say trying to play everything, if you're serious about game development, game design, you're playing the Hello Kitty version of a game. And even though it sucks, and the SpongeBob Underwater SquarePants, all that stuff, you're still playing it because you want to see what it is. Why is this game successful? Farmville. Why is Farmville successful? People can poo-poo Farmville all that they want, but it's still a successful game. So there's something there. Yes?
I want to know if you've heard of Game Dev Tycoon that just came out.
Game Dev Tycoon? I've heard of it. I haven't played it.
Yeah. I've been playing it.
From what I remember, you're controlling the nerds around.
You're starting from like an indie game developer.
And you have to convince people. Yeah, I mean, I've seen, I think, the video on Steam or something like that. But yeah. So I tried not to make, oh gosh. What is this backing up stuff? This is totally a virus. There's like some malware or something. Yeah, clearly there's something bad on this machine. Okay, so what I did is I tried to, one of the things I didn't want to happen in this lecture was for me to tell you what happened. Do you notice that he said if nobody's playing your game, then it doesn't really exist or something along those lines? Has anybody made a game in here that people are actually playing? That people are playing. People that you don't know are playing. Well, this will come as a shock to you. Neither have I. I have worked on, yeah, and there's a big yeah. I have worked on countless games that I've been paid on as a consultant, and guess what? None of them have made it to market. Not even the Rock'em Sock'em. And this was a big-time company. I mean, if you know who makes Rock'em Sock'em, you know that they're a big-time company. None of the games that I've ever worked, and that comes as a shock, but guess what? 90% of the games that are out there never make it to market. They can have hundreds of thousands of dollars. They can have all of this kind of marketing, everything ready to go, and they don't make it to market for one reason or another. So I want you to keep that in your mind also. Like there is a pressure on you to make sure that you do everything you can to make sure the code is clean, that the game plays as well as it possible, because if not, you're not going to have a job. That company will go under and you'll have to find another job. So keep that in mind also. People have to eat. This is depressing, isn't it? But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. What I did want to talk about are the concepts that are in 2.1. Now, if you did, the three of you who went through and looked at 2.1 or at least skimmed it, you could see that there's really not a lot of prescriptive advice on how to design a game. They're you're expecting probably, oh, well, let's talk about the creative process, and let's talk about brainstorming, and let's talk. There really wasn't a whole lot in there. You guys, I'm not going to beat you down with brainstorming. You've all heard that thing 1,000 times. I'm not going to insult you. But what they did talk about were some different models that were available for conceptualizing games. So when you talk about game design, people think of level design. They think of design docs and all of these kinds of things. But how do you conceptualize what this game really is? Well, many of you are already familiar with one of them, MDA, right? What does MDA stand for? Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. Now, those of you who are new to game design that are not game design majors, this is probably new material to you. But the MDA model is probably one of the most famous ones, and I can't remember who made it. But there are 3 parts to it to describe a game. They're the mechanics, the dynamics, and the aesthetics. Okay, so keep that in mind. The mechanics are the things that you are able to do in the game. Whether it's a board game, digital game, doesn't really matter. Give me an example of a mechanic. Jumping. Everybody says jumping first. Ripping off pants.
Anything you can do.
Anything, but what are other things that you can do that aren't like what you're talking about? Everybody says, okay, fine, shooting, jumping, moving. Yeah, what else?
Closing a door.
Huh? Yeah, closing a door. What else? Sleeping. Hiding. Saving.
Being seen.
Being seen. Okay, so these are kinds of things that are also rules that are there, even though they're not explicitly written down on the back of the box. Hey, you have the ability to move. Well, that would not sell. You have the ability to hide, or you have the ability to be seen. Those are things that are there. Those are still mechanics that then give rise to the next thing that's on here called dynamics. Okay, what do we mean by dynamics? How the players use the mechanics. Okay, that's the most basic kind of description. I put here that it's the action that emerges during gameplay. So these are the strategies that the user has or the player has as they're going through it. Give me an example of that.
Saving after you do something good.
No, saving before you do something. Anybody guilty of that? Boss fight. Here we go. Revert back, and it's not as bad as it used to be. Now we have autosave. We'll talk about those kinds of things before. Well, that's not exactly what I was talking about, but that could still be one. Yes. What else?
Jumping over a platform.
Jumping over a platform? Yeah. Okay. Grinding could be one. Yeah. Closing the door behind you, right? So, or trying to get into a strategic position, or so, any of these kinds of things, right? So, it's the strategy that the player has based off of the mechanics that you have allowed them in the game. And then the last thing here is aesthetics. If I ask this question, which I don't know if I would, if you haven't seen this term before, aesthetics means what?
The experience.
What it looks like.
There's 2 different versions. If you talk about aesthetics, typically it means the color of the box. It means the fonts that they use, these kinds of things. That's not what they're referring to here. It's really why the player plays. Why do you play games? To have fun, yeah, I get that. But why? Things like challenge and fellowship and all of these kinds of elements. So it's almost an emotional aspect that comes from the dynamics, which then comes from the mechanics. Okay, so they're all related. That is one model here, and I tried to boil it down there for you. They also talk about these inflows and outflows. This is more with regard to resources. So let's just talk about money, in-game money, or any kind of resource. It doesn't really matter. How do you get more of that resource?
Over time.
Breaking pots. There you go. Killing rats. Oh, okay. Hats. Hats or hacks? Okay.
I like hats.
I've seen collecting masks before. What's the difference? There's lots of different things, but you understand that all of these resources and everything, we're trying to model a game, right? To get a better understanding of it, we're talking about it in terms of a theoretical aspect. They call these things faucets and drains. I've never heard a game designer use these terms here, but they're used in the books, okay? So these inflows and outflows are basically, if you have resources in your game, how are you going to replenish them? How are you going to disperse them? What's the system that's involved in this? These are some of the things that game designers think of also. There's also this guy down here, which I've seen before, the elemental tetrad. Tetrad is just this great thing. Don't use it at your next party. But you can see some of these things, and they describe it in terms of visibility. You have less visible things and more visible things. So what is not visible, or what do you not want to be visible to the player as they're going through this?
Source code.
Source code, clearly. Chances are, if they see source code, yeah.
Well, that's your mechanic.
You do have a problem. Some of the hardware, right? You don't want them to know the internals of the game, the artificial intelligence, and those kinds of things. But they do get into mechanics and story. These are a little bit more visible. And then we finally get to the aesthetics in that sense. That's what you want the user to experience. You want them to be immersed in this. Okay? The third one that you're going to see, I'm not going to go through this monster diagram that you see right here. It is in your book, not to this level of detail, but that's why I put this up here to boil it down to a little bit more basic kind of things. So we have rules. These are the things that you would find in any game. You have rules. We talked about that. Variable quantifiable outcomes. What do they mean by that?
Scores.
A score might be, yeah. What's an outcome? What are we talking about there?
Game safe.
Good things, bad things happen in the game, right? So we're talking about games have quantifiable outcomes. Values assigned to possible outcomes. Some are good, some are bad. Player effort. Some things are challenging, some things are not challenging. Player attached to the outcome. Has this ever happened to anybody?
Mass Effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember the ending of Mass Effect?
Yeah.
Did anybody, as a child or even as an adult, get really upset and throw a control across the room?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's raising their hand. I think there's that frustration, right? We'll talk about the frustration aspect of it. That actually comes from something we're going to talk a bit about later. But you become attached to these things because you want to what? Why do you want to win? I'm serious. You think about it. Why are you doing this to begin with? Huh? Self-gratification. There you go. Ego. Right? You want to win because you want the game to tell you that you're good. Think about it. Because if you won, how many people have beaten the game just because they wanted to finish it, take it off of the shelf, never play it again kind of thing, but you just wanted to beat it, right? Because you're like that. I'm the same way. I'm playing Borderlands 2. I'm really not even enjoying it right now. I just want to finish the stupid thing, and I get to play about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then something else comes up. And so I get this one little mission, and then it has to stop. And I'm getting like a tenth of a level every time I play. And I just want to be done. I'm not even enjoying it right now. It's just to finish that stupid game. Okay? But anyway, so all of these things, if you look at it in terms of just a manifestation, you've got all these 6 pieces that are there. Don't even bother going through this. I'm not going to ask you to diagram this out on the next exam. Okay? There's a way to hide that, yeah?
Press the arrow.
Yeah, okay. See, if I press the little tab, it wouldn't do it, see? But if I press the arrows, it does. Great interface. Okay? Other things. Most games have objectives. They also have outcomes. What's the difference there? And this is really where it does get into design.
Objective is what you want to happen, and the outcomes is what will happen.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Objectives, conflict, challenge, makes the player engage, right?
Yeah.
Give me an example of objectives that pop up.
Kill here.
If you're playing an epic game, let's just go through that. We're designing an epic game. We're doing this formulaic kind of thing. We've talked about formulas in movies and other classes and such. And we were tasked with writing the epic game. How does it start?
Press space.
Don't press space. No, we're not talking about press space to win.
The princess is kidnapped.
It actually doesn't start that way typically. What happens?
It's normal environment.
You're introduced to the character, normal environment. What's happened? You go out there, hey, everything's nice and pretty. And then what happens, right?
Call
So,
to action.
how many times have you seen this? How many people have seen at least 10 games that start this way? It always starts out peaceful, and all of a sudden the bad guy comes out, steals the princess, and then the rest of it comes,
Kills your wife.
as what you would expect, right? It could be more violent. But these things are formulaic because people expect them. They're actually leveraging a lot of writing methodologies that you've seen before. Okay? So when we talk about objectives, these are to give the player something to do. And they know what it is that they're supposed to do. Oh my gosh, my girlfriend's been taken, I better go rescue her or whatever. Why doesn't the girlfriend ever fight back? I want you to write a game where you're the princess that was taken.
Or
you're, oh, did it already happen? And then you fight your way and you go rescue the guy who's supposed to come rescue you. Doesn't matter. Okay. And then you have outcomes. You have positive and negative outcomes. I think everybody knows what that is. And it involves risk, right? We can have different outcomes depending on the amount of risk that the player was willing to take. You could do the safe path or you could do the more dangerous path, and you could be rewarded with a different outcome based off of that. Okay? We also have uncertainty. This brings up a really interesting aspect to game design. Are games uncertain?
Some aspects can.
I want you to think about it, because when you go to the movie, we talked about this before, right? What's the problem with going to a movie? You watch this in suspended disbelief. You know that it's canned. Screaming at the movie film will not change the outcome, right? Even though some people try to do that, they'll say, don't go into the closet, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to affect the outcome. What about a video game?
It's human interaction. Screaming won't change it.
Screaming won't change anything, agreed.
Unless
Unless it's the mechanic, which I guess Skyrim or something like that.
Or Howler.
I'm serious. Do you have an influence over the outcome of the game?
Sandbox. Well, that's on the game. It really doesn't have to be.
You start to see what I'm talking about, because I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, right? They have all these different paths and everything. You can do these little mini quests and everything else, but do I really affect the outcome of the game? No. What happens? If I die,
Restart.
I restart. And I fight the guy again, and I die again. And then I fight the guy again. Eventually what's going to happen, I'm going to win, and the outcome is going to be the same every time. There's been one time that didn't happen. Not the final outcome, but one of these side ones, and it was in The Legend of Zelda, where the girl that's the check-in girl, I think I've told some of you this, she says, well, do you like me? And you say, yes, I like you. She said, do you really like me? I said, no, I really don't like you. Oh, do you like me, though? Yes, I really like you. Oh, do you really like me? No. And I wanted to see how long this would go on. And she says, well, come meet me at my dad's house or something like that. How many people have played this? I think it's Skyward Sword?
Yeah.
Something like that. And did you meet her?
Yeah.
What happened?
I do not remember. This was 1 year. Did it end the game?
No, it didn't. It did. Oh gosh, that would be a. And then you get married to her or something like that.
Later, yeah.
That would be different. You never fought the boss. You never fought the boss or anything. You just married. You know. That would be a letdown. 45 hours into it, and you're still. No. It wasn't that way. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? You have to make a decision there to say whether or not you really like this girl. And she's the little check-in girl, right? And she's so cute. And I said, yes, okay, I really like you. And I just wanted to see what would happen. And then she became attached, and I felt awful about it. Because every time she thought that I was really her boyfriend or something like that, and I purposely avoided going to that. I'm like, this is all virtual. And I feel bad about breaking this virtual girl's heart. And it didn't make any sense to me. But there's an emotional attachment that you try to get, as a designer, the player to be involved in, like this immersive kind of experience. Why? Because that's the whole thing. It's a suspension of disbelief. They know that they're really not going to change. You walk into a movie. Why do you go see a movie if you know that you don't affect the outcome?
To be entertained.
You see, and the same thing is with a game. You want to give them the illusion that they have an effect, right? Because we know that games that don't allow the player to have an effect over the meaningful choices really aren't very good. Candyland, all these dice rolling kinds of things are not very good. Yeah, but you see what I'm talking about, okay? So anyway, that's what we're talking about there. Yeah, we have rules and structures. Forget that. And then we also have a frame. This was an interesting aspect from it. It says this is the context that the game is played in, and it's separate from the real world. That's the definition there. So how many people would agree with that statement? Now I know what you're thinking. Just trying to trick us here. It's the context of the game. World of Warcraft, where are you? Okay. You're definitely not on planet Earth, right? It doesn't follow our rules. Are there any games that are really tied to the real world?
Yeah. I love bees.com. The Sims?
The Sims. How about online poker?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm talking about? So there are some games that cross over into the real world, and that's why I put that. Is this true for all games? Okay. On the player side, we just talked about some emotions. What kind of emotions could we evoke if we were a good designer? Amnesia. Anybody play that?
Yeah. God damn it.
That's another game that I have not yet played. And people have challenged me to play this game in the dark.
Just wait until they provide Oculus Rift support for it.
I'm not playing it with an Oculus Rift. Okay, but think about it. somebody in here was doing a horror game, right? And I think we had talked about it was a video game. And we were trying to get the psychological aspects that are associated with that. And I said, please include a clown. One of these little child clowns, right, that you just see there and it just kind of sits there. And if you see it in the corner, and then you look over here, and then you look back and the clown is gone, how many people would freak out? I would freak. I think I would just hit escape and just But you think about the psychological aspect. In that game design video that we saw, they said that you need to learn everything. And one of those psychological battles, if you're going to build a horror game, then you need to understand what people are really afraid of. And you can't just have a spider come out of the ceiling. You know, that might work with some people. You have to do psychological analysis of your, yes?
There was actually a scene like that in animation one time where you go into this area with a fountain, and I was in there, and I looked away from the fountain where it was just barely off the screen, and then I looked back at it, and there were legs coming out of the fountain.
Really?
A dead body coming out of the fountain.
Can other people verify this?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
just making sure it's not him.
happened within like half a second. And I looked back there.
And another thing, have you seen the FedEx commercial? I think it's FedEx. If it fits, it ships. And they've got the doll, the little clown doll.
Oh, God.
And it's over there, and he says, that
Yes.
thing has to go. Yeah. And the guy says, oh, well, it's FedEx next day shipping and everything. And all of a sudden they turn around, and the doll had moved up. And he was standing right next to me. He says, yeah, that thing has to go. So those are the kinds of things. How do you evoke emotion? Has anybody cried in a video game before? Yes. A lot of people have. And that's what you want as a good designer, because you want people to become immersed. You want them to become attached to the world. And that's a really difficult thing to do. Okay? So yeah, we talked about theme and all that kind of stuff. Also, as a designer, you should keep in mind that there is a finite set of things that people can remember. I don't know how good your memory is in playing some of these things, but if I have to combine this thing with this thing with this thing and then have to do this, and how many people are good at that? Not some people can remember that. Don't put too much of a burden on the user and what they're supposed to remember. That was easier. It used to be when you bought a video game, it actually came with a book, and you were supposed to take notes. And I kid you not, I took notes when I played video games, and I was drawing dungeon maps and all these kinds of things, because that's how you played games back then. Okay. Also, attention. How do you get the player's attention? How do you keep their attention in a game? What are some things that you've seen that keep attention in a game? Yes?
A loot pinata.
A what?
Loot pinata.
A loot pinata.
You kill an enemy and loot pops out.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it. Yes. Okay. Plus or minus two things that you can. One plus or minus two things, maybe. Yeah.
Engaging storyline.
Storyline. Okay. What else? Yes.
In cutscenes, you're able to make decisions, like of what they say. So you're not just like waiting to push A through the
When they actually make it like a
Is anybody guilty of that? Space. Yeah. Yes.
Humorous dialogue.
Humorous dialogue. Yes. What else?
Entertaining. Make everything
voice acting.
Okay. Entertainment. Yes.
Good music.
Good music. Yes.
Dynamic characters and voice acting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys have hit on all of these kinds of things. How would you, so that keeps people immersed. How would you get their attention? Yeah. I hate to say it, something shiny. And you see these subtle kinds of things in the Lego games. What do? If they want you to go a particular direction, you can lead them with shiny things like little coins and stuff. Bejeweled, what do? If you haven't made a move in Bejeweled, what do? They say, hey, it's thing, and then all of a sudden it's kind of, in your peripheral vision that you see these things. So there's different ways that you can get their attention. The psychology and framing challenges, we'll skip that for now. Have you ever been conditioned? You've heard of the Pavlovian experience, right? What is Pavlov? It's the dogs making them drool. You feed them on a regular basis. They hear a bell, all that kind of stuff. Have you been conditioned?
You get conditioned every time.
Absolutely, you have been conditioned, right?
Every time you learn a new controller layout, you're conditioned.
Okay, how many times have you had to learn a new controller layout?
Every game.
Not really.
Not really. Basic things. You think about it. If you sit down, how many people play a PlayStation? Okay, Xbox, fair number of you, right? Those buttons are bound to particular kinds of things. In fact, they would not let you publish that game if it didn't follow the convention that had already been established. Okay? So in Diablo, if I was going to make Diablo 4, what would I have to do?
A jump.
A jump?
A is jump.
I don't think you can jump.
It's a brand new Diablo. They just introduced it.
Okay?
You can now
that
jump.
would mess with people. You click on everything except if you want to jump, you press A. Yeah. You can do that. But there are conventions that are there, right? So you've been conditioned. If you hear, birds chirping and all this kind of stuff, and then you hear boom, what do you think's going to happen? Something bad is about to happen. So you've been conditioned partway through movies, and then they've integrated those same kinds of things, same kind of elements into it. You know how to play a game. You get better at playing a game, and you pick up on all these cues that they're giving you. So absolutely, there's conditioning that's going on. Okay? Understanding your audience. Can you design a game for everyone?
No.
E for everyone.
Well,
This is a tough one. Think about it. Why would you want to design a game for everyone? Money. Absolutely. When I say everybody, I mean you're talking about around the world. You have localization packages. You have all that kind of stuff, right? Could you do it? Could you capture 80% of the market? How many people, raise your hand, would consider yourself to be a hardcore gamer? Okay. How many people, keep your hands up, how many of you have played Plants vs. Zombies? Okay. Would you not say that Plants vs. Zombies, you think about it, you can put your hands down. That is a game that kind of transcends, everybody plays Plants vs. Zombies. Some people say, no, I don't want to play something like that. But almost everybody does. Right? What's that? It doesn't matter. You can get it on Steam. You can get it on these different platforms. But that's my point. If you do things correctly and you try to make it where it has this massive appeal, it cuts across all demographics and everything else. You've got something right there, right? If you're playing a first-person shooter, how many people are going to play it?
lot.
30, maybe 30% of the market. What's the best field to go into? Mobile casual. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, PlayStation, Xbox, all of these kinds of things. No, believe it or not, most of the money that's made is in mobile casual. What does that say that you should be looking into right now? What technology? Smartphones is a good one. Become a really good Android programmer, a really good iPhone programmer. You're probably going to have a job. What else? HTML5.
Yeah.
They are desperate for HTML5 programmers right now. If you took a book and you really learned that stuff, you could have a job tomorrow. I'm not guaranteeing that. I'm just saying you still have to be a good programmer, but they are desperate right now for HTML5 programmers. That's not a joke.
So you're saying
You should be teaching yourself everything you possibly can. When I say, look, you're learning a fraction of what you need to learn in this class. We have a finite amount of time. I can only give you so many assignments. I've already beaten you down with the assignments that I've given you. I can't give you more unless you really want me to. You have to learn things that are outside of this class. You as a game, you know you're on the right path if you're making games outside of class. If you're not, you might want to question, why am I going into this? If I don't have the passion for doing it outside of the classroom, what's the point? Make sense? All right? And that's true with anybody. I mean, computer scientists, do you write programs outside of class just because you're like, hey, I'm kind of curious about how that works? If you are, then you're probably doing the right thing, right? Not going to go too far down that path. All right. Is a mastery of a game important to you? I think we kind of talked about that already, so we'll skip over that. And then we get to this important concept right here called flow. Okay? Some of the 2002 students, I think, saw this before. What is flow? Flow is, I'm not talking about insurance.
the level of challenge is perfectly matched with the level of skill.
Yes, so let me diagram this thing out because they say this is the perfect diagram. What did I use last time? It wasn't paint. What did I use? Was it paint.net?
It was the smartboard thing.
Was it the smartboard?
Yep.
Can I just draw?
Yeah, you can draw it.
You should be able to.
How about this?
You just gotta pull up one of those markers.
What if I did this? That should give me enough room, right? And is the marker going to work? I'm sure it's not calibrated at all, is it?
Probably not.
Let's try it.
Right on the upper half.
Hey, all right. Oh, we still have this bizarro line kind of thing. Okay, so if we're looking at it as a chart here, what are my two axes? Okay, yeah, challenge versus the skill. Okay? Those are two things that we have control over. I know that we can change the challenge and everything else. What should happen during gameplay? As you get leveled and all this other kind of stuff, the challenge gets harder, right? Because you want to give them more things to do, they get more experience and all these kinds of things, right? So what should this look like? According to flow, it's this linear kind of thing, and I'll try to draw this out, where you've got this boundary right here, okay? What happens if I'm up here as a designer? The player is absolutely frustrated, okay, because they don't have the skill necessary to make, to do this challenge that you presented, which begs the question. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to make the hardest game ever. Because I'm the best designer, I'm going to make this super hard thing that nobody can beat. What's the problem with that?
No one will play it.
You're not going to make any money. You can be a great, fine, be the designer from hell, it doesn't matter. You're not going to make any money from that. Why do people play games? So that they can be beaten down? No. What do they want to do? They want to perceive that they're going to die. But then succeed. You give that to them, and people are going to be happy with your game, right? They want to think that they're about to die. They don't actually want to die, but they want to think that they're about to die. You present all these challenges, and then they have this story that they can tell their grandchildren. Oh, you wouldn't believe back in 2013. There were dragons, they were everywhere, all that kind of stuff. And they'll talk about it, right? Because you can have these shared experiences. How many people have done that exact thing with their friends? You wouldn't believe I took on these whatever, and 50 demon ponies came at me, and all that kind of stuff. My kids do that to me all the time. They come up, Dad, you wouldn't believe the gun that I found. I was killing these whatever, and then they go.
Well, Borderlands, that's a legitimate thing. It's like, you wouldn't believe. This gun shoots babies.
It's a baby shoot. And just as an off thing, so the coolest gun that I've ever seen was a senior group that created a rad roach gun. Fallout 3, what they would do is they would shoot roaches, hundreds of roaches out of this gun that would attack the player and eat them. It would just go, and all these roaches, and it would just, that's cool. That's cool. Anyway, so going back to this, you can see that if you make it too tough, of course they're going to be frustrated. So this area right up here is the frustration. What about down here? What do we call that?
Boredom.
Boredom, right? They don't have enough challenge. And so what the book says, the perfect balance between these two things kind of goes like this. And I think everybody here can relate to that, right? Sometimes it's a little bit too hard, but then you make it back and it's a little bit too easy. But in general, this is what makes it interesting. That's the perfect balance between that. They also talk about dynamic difficulty adjustment, which is another 2000 term. What's that?
When you kind of like slide it, you set it.
You're scaling, yeah, you're changing the amount of challenge based off of how well the player is doing. Okay? A lot of people don't like that. They would rather replay it, maybe do some grinding or something like that to get up to the level that they need to have. Okay? They also talk about rubber banding. What's rubber banding?
Adjusting keeps everyone around the same.
It's best seen in Mario Kart, right? What do they do in Mario Kart? If you fall really far behind, you get the blue shell, but you also go faster, right? So that you can catch up to the pack. Why do they do that? To keep it challenging for everybody, right? I know it sounds like most people don't like it unless you're back behind, and then you can catch up and you can win again, right? So they do that to keep that element of challenge there. So that's what we're talking about, flow. You're going to hear that term a lot in the game design community. Okay, a couple other things here. They talk about simulation versus emulation. This is a pretty important concept. What do we talk about for simulation? What is that?
Well, it's replicating something that already exists.
It's replicating what of something that already exists?
The experience.
It's actually the structure of the thing. Okay, so we talked about elevator simulators and traffic simulators, and they're actually modeling the structure of that system versus emulation, which is what? They're copying the behavior as opposed to the structure of it. So they're just trying to give it some behavior that's very similar. Okay, we talked about DDA, that's dynamic difficulty adjustment. Then we talk about probability. Is it okay to have luck in your game?
Yes.
Not too much.
Too much depends. Sparing.
Depends on what it's.
If it's pure luck, what's the problem with pure luck?
There's no skill involved.
There's no skill, which means no choice over, no meaningful outcomes, right? So you didn't influence the outcome at all, okay? There's an interesting thing. Let me take it back over here. I'll undo, hopefully, everything. Okay. File new. Don't save. What?
Get the eraser from the board.
Oh, gosh.
No, the actual eraser.
Everybody's talking.
There's a physical eraser in the middle.
Why didn't you say so? Tap the screen twice. Do I?
Draw a circle with the eraser. You gotta draw a circle around
Nope.
Draw a big circle around it.
That was a lie. Hey, Joe. You put your right foot in and you put your right foot out. All right, let's do it. All right, so yeah, there we go. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so one of the things that the book does, and you need to know this, basic, roll of the die. What are you going to roll? Chances are. Let's go through. How many different possibilities? If I have 2 die and I roll them, what's the lowest number I can get? 2. A 2. What's the highest number I can get? 12. So let's talk about these things, right? Because here's 2, here's 3, here's 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll stop and just put ... right here. Okay? So how do I roll a 2? A 1 and a 1. Okay? That looks good. How do I roll a 3? A 1 and a 2, or 2 and a 1. Okay. How do I roll a 4? 1, 3, 3, 1, 2, 2, 2. That. My apologies on that 1. That is a 1. What about a 5? 1, 4, 4, 1. 3, 2. Is that Chinese? Okay, that's a 4, 1. Bumps the other 2, 3, 3, 2. Is that it? Yeah, I got 1, 4, 1, 4. Yeah, 4, 1. So we're good there. 6. 1, 5, 5, 1, 2, 2, 4. Yes, 4, 2. It's getting worse. Okay. And I'll just do one more so you can understand. Okay, so what about a 7? I roll a 1, 6, 6, 1, 2, 5, 5, 2. 4, 3, 3, 4. Okay, I think that's it, right? So what's happening here, right? If I were to finish this out, I think you see what it is that we're talking about. If I were to just rely on dice, which so many people do, what are the probabilities that I'm going to roll a 2?
1 out of whatever.
1 in something, right? You can figure it out, right? What are the chances that I'm going to roll a 6? A heck of a lot higher, right? Why does this tie in with game design?
Well, I guess you can have outcomes that you want to be sort of unlikely, but you also want to have outcomes that are pretty likely so that, players get challenged but not too challenged.
Absolutely. I think everybody in here understands what we're talking about. You can use these facts right here. If you have this 2-die system that you can basically, if there's something that should happen commonly, you drop an average gun or an average amount of gold or something like that. 5, 6, 7, these are pretty common right here. In fact, they encompass almost everything. But then look at this kind of structure that we have to this. You can see that's basically probability distribution, all that kind of stuff that we've seen before. So even something as simple as roll 2 numbers can dictate a lot of information for your game. Okay.
Indeed. Don't roll 1.
Well, I don't know if you can roll a 1 with 2 dice, so there you go. We're safe. Yeah, I know what you meant. And by the way, I did have the little bag that had all the little dice, and that was a big deal.
By the way, I played a game last night. No joke. 20 rolls in a row were under 5. Like around the board, we kept rolling. They were under 5 each time.
That's when you just put the board away. And
We were like, we're just gonna.
Let's go do something better. Yeah. Okay, so we're almost to the end here because I do want to leave enough time to talk about the Bezier curves and give you some hints on how you can design that if you're stuck. Okay, and if you're not stuck, you can feel free to leave at that point. Okay, so it's interesting, and these are things that were pretty. They're pretty common in games now, but save load systems. There's trade-offs here. Just realize, do you want to allow the player to save at any point in the game? I want you to think of it this way. If you allow them an unlimited amount of times that you can save in a game, any problems with that?
Depends on the game.
If you save right before dying, you keep dying when you reload.
Yeah, that's like a thing. You don't want them to be able to save when they're in that.
Get out of jail.
How much information are you saving?
Every decade.
Well, depending on the save size also.
It can be a lot of stuff. So what if you say save, and you're on a mobile device? It can eat up a lot of space. So there's things that you would allow them to do. You can have checkpoints. You can have autosave. You can have where they can't undo it. There's lots of different options here. I think that having an unlimited number of saves is probably fine, but what's the problem? Searching through all that mess. How many people have 150 different profiles for one character and like, okay, this is save point. What did I do back then? You have to name it all. It becomes a burden on the user if you have just this unlimited number. Okay. Also realize that when you create these games, especially with the online games, that the more resources that you have, there's an economy associated with that. There are people that don't live necessarily in the United States that actually use that, and they can make that their income. There are real-world economies that are based off of gaming, right? So there are people that's their job. They camp out. They just make gold. They make gold. They do that for 12 hours a day. They know the perfect thing. And I've seen these people when I was playing a game called EverQuest.
Are you serious?
Those SOBs would sit right on top of a hut, which begged the question, how did they get up there to begin with? But then you would see the respawn. They had it timed. They knew exactly when it was going to. They would stand up. They would start to cast the thing. Boom. The kobolds were all there. Boom. The kobolds were all dead. They go down there. They pick it up. And at the time, you couldn't go up there and loot all that other kind of stuff. So that really sucks. But there are economies that are based off of that. There's also this right here, and this is a really good discussion point. There are things that are possible in our real world, right? There are also things that are plausible. And I call this the one-off Idris Shee thing. If you ever watch a movie, what makes a movie good? They say, let's take the real world, but let's change one thing. Superman. What did they change?
Superman.
Superman's not one thing.
Sure it is. Oh, it is. It is. What's the one thing? Kryptonite. Duh. If you have kryptonite, you can do anything you want to do, right? What else? Fast and the Furious.
Physics.
I wouldn't say that was really going upside down and catching the hook and all that kind of stuff. He was just the super, badass driver kind of thing. Name another movie. Almost all of the movies that I hate to say Hollywood produces, but you know what I'm talking about. They have this one-off kind of thing. Transformers. What's the one-off there? Okay, we have these aliens that are robots, right? So you can see what we're talking about there. You take the real world, you take the constraints of that, but then you change it and you add this one thing. Think about that in terms of game design, right? What if you had the ability to throw trucks? I don't know. Or what if you had a game where you were allergic to everything? I don't know. You could just make up... You can make up anything you want, but I'm saying, when it comes to game design, think of that whole one-off thing, right? Because if you have two offs, then you've got two things that don't really map back to this world. This is a great way that you can design games, right? The whole one-off kind of aspect. Level design, I think, we're not going to talk about that. There's different ways that you can. What is a sandbox? Let's just go through the terminology. Sandbox means what? Open world. You can go in and you can explore everything. Linear? Single player. What do you do in a linear game? You go from one level to the next level to the next level. It is a path from the beginning of the game to the end. I know a lot of people don't like these. I like these. You know why? They're straightforward. I don't have to think. I can just say, go, kill, and then everything's dead. Okay? Including myself. Branching. You can pick this path, or you can pick this path and knock off of this as multiple branching. And then a really good one is hub. What is hub? What's a hub in a game?
A central area.
It's a central area. Think of it as a city or something like that you go back to. You get more quests, then you go out there, you do that quest, and you come back to the hub again. Right? These are basic kinds of designs that you have in your game. Okay? Do you like achievements?
No.
Yes and no.
Depends on what you get from said achievement.
I get the avatar.
Some of them are actually kind of fun.
That's not my question. I agree. Do you like them? As a player, do you like achievements?
It makes you feel a little special.
Why do game designers put achievements in games? It gives them an extrinsic reward. Now, what do we mean by extrinsic? Something outside of them. Okay? There is a huge debate right now in the game design community as to, do you want intrinsic or extrinsic motivation in a player? Or rewards and these kinds of things. Is there an intrinsic reason? Why do you play games? Is it to get achievements?
Well, for some people, I've seen a guy who's gone on Steam for
But that's what I'm saying. I want you to think about those kinds of things, because as a designer, you may say, you know what? You get a particular reward. You get an achievement. You get something like that. Is that a long-term kind of thing? I don't think so. They've done studies that say if you're extrinsically motivated, hey, you know what? I've got 2 kids. I'm going to pay them if they get A's.
What?
They found out that doesn't, as soon as that money stops, they don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So the same thing is true in gaming. If you're giving all of these extrinsic kind of rewards, they'll stop playing your game earlier. Now, achievements, I think, are kind of this other thing. Why do you have what's good about an achievement? If it was worthwhile, like it really was a challenge to you, then it's worthwhile, right? There's an intrinsic value that's associated with that achievement. So those are really interesting. Oh, here's another one. How realistic should a game be? We're playing Madden. We're playing NBA, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The game says you open up this game, you start playing it, it's a basketball game, something like that, and all of a sudden they blow the whistle because of traveling or something like that because you forgot to dribble. Oh. Would you play a game, an NBA game, where you had to dribble the ball? I heard the director of EA, their game design, all this stuff, he said people think that they want to play football when they sit down and they play Madden or something like that. They think that they want to play football. They don't want to play football. They don't want to have to hike the ball like manually and then make sure the spiral is all correct and all that. They don't want that. They want to be the director of a football game. And that's true. You think about all the details that are associated with that. And so that's what they're talking. How realistic should it be? It's not realistic at all. You don't feel pain, fortunately, when you play these games. Maybe some of you do. Not yet. Other things to think about. What makes like the UI good? Everybody's seen good UI and bad UI. I'm going to skip over that for now. Out of all of these discussion points, these are just things that I've put here as additional kinds of things. The main thing that I would say is it's tough when you're in a game design group and you're kicking around ideas when somebody says that idea sucks. Okay? It's a two-way street. Somebody's going to come up with an idea. It may have merit. It may not have merit. You know when they say there's no bad ideas when you're brainstorming? There are bad ideas. You call them out, but you have to be diplomatic in how you say that. I remember thinking I had this really cool idea in one of these games that I was doing. I was like, oh, man, that would be so cool. And people said, no, let's do this other thing. And then they started going down that path, and I was so let down. You have to have thick skin when you're going through this process, right? So sometimes you can put your ideas in, and you can say, oh, I did that little niche right there. That was cool. And then sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you just code it up. But you code it up, right? So that would be the number one thing that I would say. You can't have too much of an ego when you get into these things because it's a personal issue when your ideas get rejected. So, okay, so if you want to leave at this point, you can. I'm going to talk about Bezier curves and the way that I would set the project up if you haven't done so already. I see people getting their pens out. So let's do this real quick.
I don't think it's working right now.
Yeah, it's not. This is because of you, too.
It should be more influenced by this.
All right, so before you start talking too much, we only have about 5 minutes left to get some of this in place. The first thing that I would recommend, when I say that I want you to turn in something that's like the demo, I want it to be like the demo. Okay, let's make that clear. It should behave like what I've given you. There are reasons that these things are in place. I don't want an approximation. I want it to look exactly that way, okay? The benefit of what it is that you're doing, the takeaway is that, of course, you can now create these paths that are not just linear. They're not just straight, right? But it also shows future paths. Is everybody with me on that, right? So if I wanted to say, where is this creature going to be in the future 2 minutes from now or something like that, I could predict where that's going to be based off of this value t as we go through time. So one of the things that I would recommend that you do is that you have 4 hard-coded points in your initial implementation of this, P0 through P3, right? Those are going to be the control points and everything else. Don't let them so they're draggable, any of that kind of stuff yet. Just leave them visualized on the screen. The next thing that I would recommend that you do is that you create a function. You have a class called point, right? And that's going to be one of these little white dots that you see. A point is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a dot that's going to be on the screen that has an X, Y position. And you have a function called, let's say, generate Bezier. lines or something like that, right? And it takes in 4 points. And I'm just abbreviating some stuff right here. Now look at this. Wouldn't it be cool that if I passed 4 points to this function, it would return me a list of points? Huh? It doesn't need t. Okay? I'll show you how I would implement this, right? Because I have implemented it. I mean, those are my demos. But anyway, wouldn't it be cool if we had this, and then we could call it any time that we need it. It would return us a list of all the points, the 100 points that are there in that Bezier curve. Is everybody with me? So that's the design, the structure of it. Now, if I were going to do this, I would have something like this. For float t, get 0.0f. So long as t is less than or equal to 1.0f, t plus equals 0.1, okay, f. Now what is this doing? How many points would I have if I ran this loop?
10.
4. Oh, not, yeah.
Well, okay, the 4 points came in. Those were the control points, not the little white dot thing. What have I just done? Okay. You're a computer scientist, aren't you?
No.
Oh, you are? Really? Okay. There's no. Smart you are. So, yeah, we're going to have 11 here, right? It's going to go up from 0 to 1. It doesn't matter if it's off by 1, okay?
It
Why
does
is-
if you're trying to be precise.
Why is this important? What have I just done? Because if I know that t is incrementing in tenths, then I'm going to have 10 points. What if I said I wanted 100 points? 0, 1. There you go. What about 1,000 points? There you go. So we can change the granularity based off of this step that we perform right here. Everybody get that? What do we do on the inside of this? Well, Andrew and I were talking about this before. What I would probably do is to say float t squared gets t times t. And then I would have float 1 minus t squared gets 1 minus t squared. Okay? And then I've got t cubed and all these other kinds of, or is it t cubed? It is t cubed, right? Because we're working with, yeah. Okay? So I would set up all of these variables. You know why? Because then to calculate a new point, all I have to do is look at that formula there. I created this point, and then I can add it to the list. Let me say that again, right? We're iterating through this. In this case, it's 1,000 points that we're going to create. Everybody with me on that part? I calculate all these intermediate variables, and from that, I can calculate a new x and a new y position based off of the formula, and then add that point to a list of points. So what I would do up here is to have something like a list of points called temp or something like that, bring it to life, and then you can just dump them in there. Now watch why this is cool, because anytime I move one of these control points, right, because I can drag these little control points around and everything else, what do I have to do? Just call this guy. Yeah, wipe out the prior list, all that kind of stuff. But then, to create a new path there, all I have to do is call this function. Same thing. You're just changing, the points that you're passing it to begin with. So does that structure make sense? Let me walk through that again, right? So we have a loop that executes 1,000 times, and it's going between 0, or 1,000 and 1, going between 0 and 1, eventually makes it there. And what I'm doing is I'm then going to calculate a new point based off of what t is. New x and y based off of t. Once I've calculated that point, I'm going to add it to this temporary list, and the last thing is to return that list. How can I drag stuff? Because if you've noticed, you can take the little green handles and you can drag them around. And you can see that curve change and everything else. How did I do that?
You have essentially mouse.
If the mouse is down, check to see if it intersects any of the 4 points, the physical things that are the handles that are on there. Then what? If it is, how does the dragging occur? If the mouse is still down and that thing is selected, what do I do? The XY of that handle becomes the XY of the mouse. That's it. And then as soon as you release, all of that stuff goes away. So it's a little bit of logic. It's not super easy logic, but it's not super hard logic. Yes?
Do you, I haven't looked at it yet, but do you have comments in the code like the last one? Because that helped a lot.
I don't have any code on this one.
Oh, really?
Why did I do that?
Stop.
Push us out of the nest.
I hate to say, yeah, stop babying you. It was more, now that you've seen how an XNA program works, you could start to then just use the same stuff that you've seen. Whether you've come from Java or any of that, you've seen every bit of XNA for the most part that you need to see. Okay, so there's no more XNA tutorial aspect to this course. Okay, yes?
Can I use the work function, or do I have to do that?
Wait, what?
I want you in this case to do your own math.
That's fine. I
Yeah.
was just wondering.
Okay, so he's asking if you can use like linear interpolation and stuff like that. I would prefer you not to. Yeah. No, there's no function. There's in the real world, yes, you would use math libraries and additional things. Yes.
On that, is this fast if you write your own, or would you just tell them to use theirs?
First of all, in the real world, I would not regenerate new. Anytime you say new anything, that's never a good idea. Let me say that again. So if you've got an update and you're saying new and new and new and new and new, you're eating up tons of memory. So in the real world, I would not generate a new list. I would reuse the old list and just change the X and Y values that were in there, right? Because that, not so much the speed I'm worried about as the memory beating down that we're doing with the system. So in this case, if the garbage collector runs, I don't care. It could be a little bit slower. I really don't care. But in real games, you would never do something like that. Anything else? You probably saw all that stuff in data structures, right? So you understand it.
Yeah, C++.
Hey, does C# have a garbage collector?
Okay, so that's it. I'll see you on
I made
Wednesday,
a for loop.
yes.
I made a for loop to clean up the list of points, and I was like, going backwards, making it all null. Okay, sorry. Garbage collector. Wait for a minute.
Did you do that all the time?
Good luck.